Everybody act tough when they up.
PodSham Pod.
Hey guys, welcome back. Episode 4 of the PodSham Pod. Only several hours removed from the NBA draft lottery, where Adam Silver and Mike Andrews were having an interesting conversation about some innovations to come, specifically the mid-season tournament.
1.5 games into the conference finals at this point. Thus far, every game has been a blowout. So hopefully they pick up. So when you have two great things, why not put them together? We are going to take the conference finals teams to start and do an expansion draft where every conference finals team gets to pick one player from a lottery team. Now, for this exercise, we're going to rule out stars. So no Dame Lillard, no Darius Garland, these sorts of players.
Yep. The guys that you just viscerally know don't belong in a sort of like role player redraft. Imagine if, as the playoffs are starting, Adam Silver gets on national television and says, all right, playoff teams, pick your favorite guys from the teams that didn't make it. They're on loan for a couple months or a few weeks, and then they'll go back to their lottery teams after the playoffs end. So that's what we're doing here in reverse order of regular season finishes. So that's going to be Celtics, Mavs, Heat, Warriors, just one guy each. And yeah, well, let's get right into it. So
Let's do it.
The first pick is the Boston Celtics. And since this is a podcast, I'm going to talk about my thought process behind this pick. You know, a talking point for the Celtics, despite their incredible last couple weeks, is the lack of ball handling. Just sometimes how scary it is getting the ball across the half court line. The third quarter in game 1 against Miami was terrifying. Just the number of times that the Heat, pick six their way to an easy layup. And so my first thought with this first overall pick was, how can we get a true, more old school point guard to stir the drink? You don't have to be a shot creator. They have more than enough shot creation among Tatum, Brown, a little Smart, a little Horford, etc. I have some names, and those names, one of them is a guy who put on Tim's and really pissed me off at the dunk contest. He goes by the name of Cole Anthony. Now, I don't know how I feel about this one. This option in our war room was really controversial because I feel like he's both the guy to tell Grant Williams to pipe the fuck down and Jason Tatum to pipe the fuck up. And maybe they need that, maybe they don't. Another guy on our high on our board was TJ McConnell.
Okay.
Nice tight handle. He's a steals wizard, but he might hurt some of your switchability.
Would he get minutes over Peyton Pritchard?
Yeah, if he wears Peyton Pritchard's jersey, I think we might not tell the difference.
Okay.
No, but he'd give you some things defensively that Peyton doesn't give you.
Okay.
Then if somehow we could revive Ricky Rubio, I like the idea of him patrolling the backcourt, but he also makes $17 million a year, so it's hard to imagine them fitting him in any dimension. And then the sort of cheaty pick, because he's a role player now, but was a lottery pick. I put down Davion Mitchell.
Okay.
Because he has a little bit of Marcus Smartness. He's a little bit smaller, probably better at guarding point guards already, but also a really good handle and can kind of get the ball up the court for the wing scorers to help them with that challenge they've been facing. And so my favorite guy on this list is Davion. And that would be my personal choice.
Yeah, I could see the Davion one being good just because their strength is so much that they have no weak defenders on their team. So You saw in game 1 when Smart was out and Horford was out that Jimmy Butler just went after whoever the weak defender was on the court, whether it was Pritchard, usually Pritchard, occasionally Derek White, who's not a weak defender, but relatively is a weak defender. So if you have Davion out there, as an on-ball defender, even as a rookie, he was very good. So I could see that kind of keeping their defense afloat and also giving them a little bit more burst off the dribble. So I like that pick for sure. I'm a little worried that my guys are too good with the guys that you threw out, but we will see.
That's fine because we really can't lose the casuals. They make up the majority of our audience.
So
with
Dallas.
the second pick in the conference finals expansion draft, the Dallas Mavericks select.
Really, when I was looking at Dallas, I thought two things stood out to me. One, they can use more reliable 3 and D guys on the wing, sort of, people to bring more of what Reggie Bullock and DFS bring, or even perhaps be a more reliable version. But really, to me, the glaring thing that stuck out was they need a better version or a better person to put in the Dwight Powell spot. Yep. And clearly they're a team that is at its best when Maxi Kleber is at the 5. And it seems like the only reason they don't go to that all the time is that Kleber fouls a lot. And they do like having a rim running option for Luka as well. So this guy's much better than the guys that you were listing. The perennial trade deadline hot catch who never actually gets traded, Miles Turner for Dallas. I thought that would be.
Oh my God, he's finally leaving Indiana.
It took the expansion conference finals draft to happen, but I think he would give Dallas, and honestly, in their offseason, it would not be a bad idea for Dallas to poke around, seeing if they can get Miles Turner. I think if they could do Tim Hardaway in a pick or something for Miles Turner, that would be really nice. But he would just give them still a rim running element that Dwight Powell has, but also with the added 3-point shooting element that Kleber has, and being a rim protector as well. He's probably not as switchable as Kleber on defense, but still would be a really good 5 for them. And as long as he doesn't demand too many post touches, I think would be really good for them. He was honestly the only player on my board. Also, just as a fun throw out name, I think Tyrese Halliburton would be really good with Luka Doncic, but
so would also push Luka in to relinquish some of the control on the ball. Can only make your team better to have players as smart on offense as Tyrese Halliburton, even though he isn't the type of player that Luka has learned to cooperate with, at least to this point.
Yeah, but he just seems like the kind of guy who can cooperate with anyone.
Totally. And there's been so much Pacers, Miles Turner breakup talk over the last few years that I feel like you're the friend who just like took the phone and sent the breakup text and said, like, I'm ripping the Band-Aid off. So thank you for that on behalf of the community.
Oh, I picked 2 Pacers. I didn't even realize that. It's just the Knick fan in me.
With the third pick in the conference finals expansion draft, the Miami Heat select Sadiq Bey.
Oh,
I hope we didn't take him off your board, but with the Heat, I was what I wrote down was shot creation. We saw it just now in game 2. It's been a concern with Miami. They lean a ton on Jimmy to carry the scoring. Tyler Harrow said before this season that he's ready to be considered in like the Luka tier of young superstars, and his shooting hasn't been consistently efficient, and the Heat do a lot of things really well, but they often struggle to score against great defense. And so I just think that Sadiq Bey is a born bucket getter. He has a pure 3-point shot, and he's confident in it, is really good at exploiting a matchup, and could actually learn a lot from Jimmy about sort of how to bully the 6'4" guard who switches on to you. And then just a fun wild card that I threw at the bottom of my board, but I'm not confident in, is Trey Mann of the Oklahoma City Thunder, who we will be talking about more. Trey Mann quietly averaged 15 in February and 16 in March, shooting 7 threes a game. Really pure shot. Like I stumbled into a couple league pass games with him and was like, who the hell is that smooth ass 6'5" born scorer? So I think that he could be a Jordan Clarkson-y guy at some point. That was the vibe I got watching him a little bit this year.
All right. Yeah. Well, Sadiq Bey's a good pick for sure. I was looking at him with my next pick. He wasn't my final selection, but he was definitely on the short list, just as someone who can shoot threes and, has the size and length to at least be able to stay in front of average players 1 through 4. But for the Warriors, the last pick in the conference finals expansion player draft, I am very tempted to go with Harrison Barnes, bring him back. I also threw around the idea of Gordon Hayward, but he's a little too much of a big name guy.
Yeah. But he has some great like secondary skills.
Yeah, just as a
shame when the contract outweighs the skill set.
I was thinking someone who can shoot threes and credibly guard 1 to 4. Because the Warriors, we saw some limitations with their sort of new death lineup when they're not playing the Nuggets, who are without all of their perimeter ball handling. They have guys who are exploitable, whether it's mostly Poole, and it also forces Clay and Wiggins to play up against fours and rebound in a way that they are capable of, but it's not their forte. So yeah. I landed on Basketball Nerd's favorite player, Lou Dort.
Oh my God.
A 6'5" brick shithouse. Shot 33% from 3 this year on high volume, about 7 a game. So
he shrinks an inch every year on Basketball Reference. When he was drafted as a wing defender, and suddenly somehow he's like 6'2", 290 on ESPN. But yeah, he is so good. And also, yeah, despite the fact that James Harden swatted the shit out of his last really meaningful shot in the NBA, totally gives off playoff cojones vibes.
Also, and James Harden's last meaningful play in the NBA.
Yeah. Lou Dort somehow like took a James Harden Horcrux with him from that play. Something that, but yeah, I love the idea of Dort being in meaningful games, which is actually why I was gonna ask you if there's a league pass team going into next year that really catches your eye, because I mentioned OKC. I kind of showed my cards there. I just can't wait to watch the next iteration of this team with a year of maturity for Giddey. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander just had a career year and somehow shot 30% from 3 after shooting 42% 2 years ago. I'm not worried about Shai's shooting. I think that we have a large enough sample that he's going to be competent. Like, he's not going to be disrespected unless he has another really bad shooting year from 3. And he also takes a lot of end of the shot clock threes for a team that doesn't always have a lot of playmakers on the floor. So Shai, he gets to the line 5 times a game. I'm all in on Shai as a superstar. I had him 6th on the board in his draft, and it's still one of the only things I've accomplished in my life. But I love Giddey. Giddey does not get to the line like Shai. He got to the line 1.5 times in his rookie year. And I feel like, because I don't think he's ever going to be a high volume 3-point shooter, even if 3-point competence comes, he was below 30% this year. So he has a long way to go. But I mentioned the Jimmy Butler old man game of just like getting your ass in a smaller guy's chest and kind of forcing your way to the line, flailing, kicking out to shooters like Trey Mann. I think Giddey's path to making up for being a low volume 3-point guy is, getting to the line 5 times a game like Shai does. And then, you mentioned Dort, who's pretty much tied with Jayshawn Tate for my favorite thick boy in the league. Lou's resume speaks for itself. But then like the cherry on top, the reason I can't wait to watch this team, shout out Micah, I know you're listening, is Jabari Smith. And it seems like after, we mentioned the lottery, there's a lot of Chet going 1 to the Magic buzz, which means it's highly plausible that Jabari Smith is a member of the Oklahoma City Thunder, which Sam Presti, I'm begging you, take this guy. He's my favorite player in the draft. I just can't remember evaluating a 6'10" guy with that pure stroke. And kind of one of the weaknesses you'll find on every draft website is that you don't want him taking more than 2 dribbles yet, and that the ball handling is a work in progress. Well, great, because how many teams in this portion of the draft can you find that have 2 extremely capable ball handlers that really just need somebody to dribble twice and dunk or shoot, or pick and pop or catch lobs, and then protect the rim on the other end? I love the Oklahoma City Thunder. I think there'll be appointment streaming whether or not they take Jabari Smith, but especially if they do. And also, Poku still has the highest Q rating in the league.
Yeah, and if the Magic take Jabari, and the Thunder take Chet, that's still going to be like appointment viewing just to see what happens. Cause like,
Yeah.
I have no idea on Chet. I love the intensity with him and his sort of well-rounded skill set, but it could also just flame out spectacularly. And it's also just it's such a novelty to watch this 7-foot guy who probably weighs less than I do run around on the court and like make things happen.
Yeah.
So yeah, if they don't take Jabari, the novelty of watching him run around is just, and then, you know, it kind of feels like when the Sixers made the transition from just depressing process to actually having young players now, like good young players. And I don't think the Thunder have anyone on their team like Embiid, but if you remember that first year where Embiid played like 30 games, it was like, oh, okay, there's actually something here. I
Shout
wonder
out
if
Greg Oden.
Yeah. I wonder if we'll see something like that from the Thunder this year, where just sort of the Shea, Giddey, and whoever they pick it to. Let's see. So other teams that come to mind for like lottery teams for League Pass next year. I mean, Cleveland is, I don't know if that's like a fair choice because they were basically a playoff team for most of the year until their whole team got hurt, but they're probably going to be a good team next year. And I could see Mobley, you see with these kinds of rookies that really jump off the screen, and he had such a historic campaign on defense. I could see him taking like a star leap next year where he kind of just figures things out a little bit more offensively and is really firmly in that all-star conversation already. And then paired with Garland, who continues to get better, whatever they figure out with Sexton, whether they keep him or move him. And, you know, they'll add another lottery pick to the mix. Jared Allen's always fun to watch. He's always either dunking on people, getting dunked on, or trying to stop people from dunking on him. And then the same goes for Detroit with Cade, because I could see Cade also taking a star leap in his second year. I mean, that was such a strong draft last year. We've already talked about Giddey, but Cade and Mobley both flashing so much potential and already being so good. And typically with these really good players, it's in that second year that you see him take a real big leap. So both of those teams, I'll certainly be watching closely to see what Cade and Mobley look like.
Yeah. I think that there is a really nearby parallel dimension where the Cavs sneak into the 8th seed and are kind of the Pelicans East. They push the Heat to 6 or even a competitive 5.
Bonus lottery team, which was the first team to come to mind until I realized they didn't actually miss the playoffs because they have a lottery pick, thanks to the Los Angeles Lakers, as the New Orleans Pelicans. I just can't wait to watch them next year. I'm such a Zion truther. I'm on the Zyland. I'm not leaving. All right. So a couple episodes ago, I mentioned that it's become apparent to me that whenever a team loses a playoff game, it's very easy for optimistic fans of that team to point to particular factors that aren't going to happen again. Like, we lost, but we shot terribly. And same for the team that wins. There's always factors they can point to which would make them think they'll win by even more next time. So we're bringing that segment back, calling it Rose-Colored Glasses. It's going to be a bit of a recurring segment. Semler, give me the name of the team in the Western Conference Finals, and I will do my best to embody the optimistic fan.
Okay, Mark Cuban. What do you take from the last couple of hours dancing on the sideline?
Look, I mean, the guys had no rest on the road, coming off of a Game 7 in Phoenix, which, I mean, we kicked their ass, and it was a real emotional win for us, getting past the second round and winning 2 series for the first time since we went and won the championship, with Dirk sitting courtside. So no rest, a little bit of a mental letdown after our Game 7 win. Luka played the worst playoff game of his career, and he typically tends to follow those up with great performances, all-time performances. So watch out for Game 2, Golden State. And, you know, we weren't competitive in the first 2 games of the Sun series, really, and look what happened there. And same with Game 1 in Utah, we lost against an inferior Utah team. So we'll take some time to adjust to playing Golden State. We also had a horrible 3-point shooting game, like the worst we've had all playoffs.
Shooting variance.
Yeah, you know, that's not going to continue. If we hit a few of those in the first half, will be right there. And it's a totally different game.
Only counts as one loss.
Yeah, 1-0. They did what they're supposed to do.
Okay, Bay Area Tech, bro. Tell me why there's nothing to worry about going into game 2 for the Dubs.
I mean, we kicked their ass. Like, after playing Memphis and all the insane length and athleticism that they had, it was just a walk in the park going against this Dallas defense. Like, and still not shooting that well from three. Like, we were one of the better 3-point shooting teams in the league all season long. We were in the low 30s. Clay, Steph, and Poole.
Clay got going late.
I disassociating myself from Tech Bro for a second. I texted my buddies at the start of the game when Clay missed like 3 shots in a row. I was like, with Clay now, you can immediately tell whether it's going to be a good game or a bad game. But I was wrong because he looked horrible at the beginning, and then he ended up like 7 of 13 with double-digit points. So, anyways, getting back into character. Clay and Steph in the first half in particular didn't play that well. Poole didn't shoot very well. That trio is due to break out from 3 at some point. And Steph, can you please stop missing free throws? Like, come on. And I thought on defense.
Wait, but sir, what about all these side eyes directed at Jordan Poole from Klay Thompson? It seems like Klay embraced the new kid in town initially, and now there's a little bit of tension. Is that going to derail you deep into this series?
That's just cameras playing tricks. Klay doesn't care about anything. He'll be fine. Just as soon as he sees a few of those shots go through the hoop, he's still getting his shots.
I heard Jordan shit talked Klay's dog Rocco, but I don't know. I think that was just a Twitter rumor.
Just like Luka Doncic having a beer on game day.
Yeah, although he did play like he had been vaping the night before.
Yeah, that was a Luka Doncic performance.
We'll just call this victims of the moment, victims of the playoffs. Let's just get some things off our chest. The things that we probably will regret putting on a podcast because they happened so recently, but strong feelings we have based on some recent events. And yes. I'll just start it off because I really need to ask you, prime Jimmy or prime CP?
Ooh, wow. So prime Jimmy's like bubble Jimmy?
I think the Jimmy we're getting now is pretty much bubble Jimmy. I mean, the stats they're pretty similar. He's in the Western Conference Finals. Maybe bubble Jimmy had a little more spring in his step, a little more coffee in his veins, but Jimmy's still at the peak of his powers.
I'm still gonna. It's an interesting question because I don't think Jimmy's in his prime ever played with the level of teammates that Chris Paul has played with in his various stops, whether it's prime Blake Griffin, James Harden, Devin Booker even. But I feel like at a certain point it matters when Chris Paul was like a top 5 MVP candidate year after year and consistently getting first team all NBAs, and Jimmy Butler was just not in that breath. But in the playoffs, I mean, his resume's just as good as Chris Paul's, I'd say. So
what do we do with Jimmy, man? It's just,
I don't know. He's such a weird player.
Yeah. Last year he was hurt, so you kind of give him the pass for losing so quickly to the Bucks. It seems like when he's healthy, and he's often healthy, he's not a big injury risk. It seems like even when he's bruised, he's showing up to playoff games and delivering.
He just has such, and this sounds like a Spoelstra thing to say. I'm sure it's a direct quote from Spoelstra that I'm just not remembering, but he has elite like will. He just seems like he does everything through sheer force of will. Like even when he shoots a turnaround jumper, it looks like he's willing it into the basket. He just has this way about him, and he draws fouls in a way that's not fluky at all. It always translates to the playoffs in a way that, Harden and Chris Paul and other sort of foul baity players doesn't translate as much. Because he just gets guys to jump into him. He's always attacking. He's an incredible defensive player. He absolutely took over the third quarter of that game 1 against Boston with his off-ball defense.
His player efficiency rating is always extremely high in the playoff, despite the fact that he's rarely relying on 3-point shooting. Even tonight in game 2, a blowout loss for the Heat, he got to the line 8 times, got his 29 points. He showed up. I just can't remember the last meaningful game where I felt like Jimmy Butler didn't show up. He takes shots that he is so confident in, and he knows his game to a T. He can't guard Joel Embiid, but he played so hard in that series and took a lot of hits. So yeah, I've been struggling with what we do with Jimmy. In defense of Chris Paul, I was saying this to you before we started recording. Like, man, it reminds me a lot of when the Blazers got to the Western Conference Finals and got swept by the Warriors. And then there was a lot of Dame slander, a lot of Portland slander, like they're not even relevant, which, maybe that's fair. Maybe they're not relevant title contenders, but they look worse in retrospect because they won that Denver series a few years ago. In the same vein, Chris Paul continues to play at such a high level at 37 and then has such a dud of a 2 or 3 game span. And he's held accountable as if, this is 32-year-old Chris Paul who should still be in his prime. It's hard to know. Apparently we heard it was a quad injury. It's a conundrum because, in game 1 and against the Pelicans, carried them in that series. But, he's going to take some heat. And you know what? You deserve some of it when your team comes out that flat because he is a leader, whether or not his physical ability is what it once was.
Yeah. Yeah, God. That game was so weird.
Speaking of the Suns, before we get to yours, I feel like that leads into another question I had, which was, Dame liked an Ayton to the Blazers tweet. Am I overreacting when I say I don't really want Ayton on the Blazers? I really believe in Monty Williams as America's priest. And I feel like he's such a wholesome, good dude. And that, Chris Paul drives me crazy, but he's a winner. And if it didn't work with DeAndre Ayton, and if he's playing PS5 until 7 a.m, do I want his incredible talent on the Blazers? I don't know.
So there have been some bad draft picks over the course of NBA history, things you look at in a vacuum many years later and say, oh, Anthony Bennett over Giannis Antetokounmpo, that seems bad. People will probably say that in 20, 30 years. But there's bad draft picks that are bad in retrospect, like that one. But at the moment, Giannis, no one knew what to do with him. He was this very limited. He had very limited scouting on him. And Bennett was, if he was not a consensus number 1 pick, but he was a consensus, top 5 guy at the time. So, in the moment, that's not crazy. Then there are draft picks, which in the moment are crazy and turn out crazy as well.
Yeah.
And those, I think, are the truly bad draft picks where you knew it was bad as it was happening. And I think DeAndre Ayton over Luka Doncic is the 3rd worst draft pick of all time, or going back to the 80s, since I don't really know much before that. 3rd worst, trailing only Sam Bowie over Michael Jordan.
Yay.
Go Blazers. And Marvin Bagley over Luka Doncic.
Yeah. So no, at least Greg Oden was an injury bust, which I don't even like to call those guys busts. Kwame Brown is a bust. He played and he wasn't good enough for where he was selected.
With Oden, it wasn't a consensus. What the hell are the Blazers doing when they took Oden? And even when he played, he had flashes of being a really good player. And Hakeem over Jordan isn't a terrible pick because Hakeem ended up being a 2-time champion Hall of Famer. So, but at the time, most draft experts were saying this guy, Luka, is incredible. And it wasn't like we were in an era like 5 or 6 years before that with Jahlil Okafor going in the top 5 and stuff where you had to have a good center. This was a 2018 draft coming off the Warriors' 3rd championship in 5 years. Their dominance playing small ball. Cleveland repeatedly getting to the finals with a 5-out system. This wasn't a situation where it was like, oh, you got to take the big man. It was just, it seemed like everyone agreed Luka was the top prospect and that he was going to go 3. And it didn't really make any sense, particularly with Sacramento and Phoenix, who had his Slovenian national coach as the head coach at the time. And for some reason didn't take him, although they ended up firing him shortly thereafter. And then Sacramento, who had sort of the ties to European basketball through Vlade Divac. I don't know if there was some issue there, but yeah, the fact that both of those teams passed on him, and I don't care how good Trey plays. I don't care how many times he puts up 30 and 10. Giving away
Wounded Knicks fan speaking.
trading,
yes, of course.
Trading a star for a superstar is horrible. It's like all of those teams probably lost out on a championship by not taking Luka Doncic.
Yeah. Luka won the MVP of a league comprised of teams that will upset an NBA team during like an NBA team summer trip.
Yeah.
He was 16 playing against fathers, husbands, and dominating at the second best league in the world. And all the signs were there. Weirdly enough, that the Suns had the right infrastructure to recognize the international talent and somehow still passed on him. It's all bad. And a testament to how special Luka is, because Ayton's had a really good first couple of years. And most seasons, Ayton as a first pick wouldn't be a disaster. You'd be like, okay, even if he's not the best player in his draft, he had, like you said, a ton of like 2010s, 2000s first pick credentials. But this was different. This was a draft where there was a virtuoso available and two teams passed on him. And for some reason, the Suns were the surprise, but with the Kings, it was like even slower motion. It's like, they're the Kings and this is what they do. And we heard there was some rumor that Luka didn't want to work out for them or was not going to go to Sacramento.
Yeah, I was just trying to go back through like these all-time greats and think of guys who were like underdrafted in a horrendous way, but like, I mean, LeBron went number 1 overall, so there's no horrible pick going in front of him. I guess Darko over Dwayne Wade, that's probably one that should be in there as well.
Any other victimhood you'd like to speak of?
Well, I've got a few that are related to Luka, so I'll just condense them. But I feel like we're seeing the best crop of young stars that we've had in my lifetime as a fan, which dates back to like 2006 or so. And the difference is also the old crop is still good. Like guys are aging better than they ever have with they've had disappointing end to their seasons for different reasons, but LeBron and Chris Paul still being really good players at 37, KD at whatever he is, 33, 34, still being a top 5 player. Steph's going to age really well.
Yeah. A friend made an interesting comment to me. Shout out Andy. Said that he thinks we're past the era of bad drafts really happening. Just there's so much talent now domestically and abroad that like even in drafts that lack stardom, that you get like, there are just so many athletic wings, like guys like Zaire Williams and Jaden McDaniels, that every year we're going to have those switchable guys and we're just going to fill up the league with competent athletic defenders. Like the bad drafts have paused for a little while.
Yeah, I like that. That's kind of like in the NFL now, every year is a fantastic receiver class.
Yep.
Like it's just, you go from Justin Jefferson to Jamar Chase to Drake London, like just every year is the same. So yeah, that's interesting. And I mean, when we were going through our roll call, like, I mean, I was struck by just how good a lot of these rotation guys are. And the teams that didn't make it out of the second round in Milwaukee in particular just didn't, and Philly, I think, just didn't have the 5 through 9 that they needed to make that happen.
Yep.
Luka and Giannis, Magic and Bird, 2020s.
Game 7 home court advantage. Not cool anymore.
Yep. Unless you're Boston. One more potential inefficiency. Hiring coaches who are smart but flamed out before.
All right. This has been episode 4 of the PodCham Pod. Sorry I made you listen to the idea of TJ McConnell being a Celtic. Grandma, thanks for listening.
Thanks everybody for listening, and just don't make me watch the Boston Celtics in the finals.